president of ACSA. Now we're recording, and a faculty member at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm joined tonight by members of our ACSA Board of Directors and our ACSA staff. We want to thank everybody for taking the time to meet with all of us tonight and gathering as a community. So we know that there are other things on the top of everyone's minds related to the slew of federal actions and orders. Last week, ACSA gathered 11 organizations, in addition to ourselves, AIA, AIAS, AICAD, ARCC, CCCAP, CELA, IDEC, NAB, NOMA, and SAH, to begin to communicate across our networks and to discuss our shared concerns. And we are offering space in our upcoming caucus on February 27th and our annual business meeting on March 5th to hear more from our members. And I hope you can join us then. So this caucus was scheduled prior to January 20th to provide a brief update on ACSA's work to related to accreditation funding and to follow up on a series of discussions related to NCARB's new competency framework. And I see Jeremy Fretz here. Hello. On accreditation funding, since we last met in a special business meeting last August, ACSA submitted our member vote and resolution to NAB. That was 95 votes for, 4 opposed, and 2 abstained. We also submitted a joint letter communicating some of the concerns voiced by our members throughout our talk stories, and that also went to NAB. ACSA then gathered our Architectural Alliance member organizations and submitted to NAB an outline of a collective funding counter proposal for their consideration. So NAB did not respond to the outline itself, but has communicated their willingness to enter into a mediation process. So where we're at now, we're currently working to bring NCARB, AIA, AIAS, and NOMA together to agree to a mediation format, and we look forward to that opportunity. Even more so now, we want to reinforce the support structures between education and the profession that hold up our discipline. In a moment, I don't see everybody on screen, but I will at least point towards Jeff Day, president of NAB, to say a few words. That's in a little bit. Moving on, in our November Administrators Conference in Denver, we held a special Accreditation Futures workshop led by Beth Lundell-Garver, Renee Chang, and Phil Bernstein. That session took a blue sky look at accreditation. Administrators there identified their interests in rethinking what and how we evaluate what we do as architectural educators and how we address future needs. In that same conference, we hosted a session about the NCARB competency framework with NCARB President Ken Van Tine, the NCARB Competency Task Force Chair Sean Roberts, and the now retired Harry Falconer. The response in that session prompted us to host a January 21st webinar on the competency framework open to all of our members. And this was presented by Jared Zern, NCARB Senior Vice President of Programs, and Jeremy Fretz, NCARB Assistant VP of Policy and International Relations. Anyone interested in watching their presentation can find it on our website. I think we're going to try to put a link in the chat. And if you haven't been able to review the new competency framework, we're going to put a link to it in the chat as well, because we are not reviewing the entire competency framework again in this meeting. But all of those sequence of meetings and sessions brings us here tonight. So all of these discussions point towards shifts in the relationship between education, accreditation, and licensure. Architectural licensure is moving toward the assessment of 16 competencies that represent the required proficiencies for entry into the practice of architecture. How this will be assessed is still being discussed, and as educators, we would like to explore how education can continue to be an integral part of this process. So our conversation tonight really focuses on your thoughts about this. So we have a few questions. The agenda for tonight is we have a few questions to post on Menti, and then we're going into breakout groups. But before we do that, I do want to introduce, let's see if he's here. Jeff Day, if you're here, could you pop on? I know he texted me that he was driving in traffic. No, not here yet. Okay, I'll circle back later on. Then did see Jeremy. If you want to introduce yourself and say a few words on behalf of the framework, that would be great.
Sure. Sorry. Thought it was safe to eat my soup now. Um, Good to be with you all. And I'm just here to answer questions and to be available to you. I think we're excited about the possibilities the framework has, and if you watch the webinar, you'll see that we emphasize that it's not intended to be an outline for what you must cover in education, but we think it offers an interesting opportunity for what you could cover in education and maybe even completely reach competency with the student in education. If your program is one that's focused on preparing students for licensure, I think looking at the competencies and thinking about how those apply is a great place to start. So I hope that's enough, Kathy. I don't want to take up the rest of the meeting. This is for you all.
No, that's fantastic. And I can't see if Jared is on. I don't mean to miss anybody. Okay, no, thanks, Jeremy, for being here and for joining us. I know this has been a series of meetings and you've been so generous with your time, so thank you.
Sure.
Okay, then to start off, we have a few Menti questions to start to get a sense of where everyone is coming from. So if we can get that up. If you haven't used Menti, this is easily done on your phone also, if you don't want to kind of go between all of your laptop screens. You just go to menti.com, menti.com, and then type in the code. We're also going to put the code in the chat, and it's at the top of the page. And we encourage, some of you might just want to listen in and eat your dinner, but we really encourage you to do this. All of this data helps us to better communicate with other organizations, and it helps us to plan subsequent sessions or actions to support all of you. So we hope you'll participate. Let's see. Okay, sorry, now it's on. So what programs are you representing today? And we did extend this invitation as to our 2-year and 4-year degree program representatives, because we really wanted to reach out to what we're, we've been talking about this larger ecosystem of architectural education. So it's great to see people from 2-year programs, 4-year programs. It looks like we have a number of people from universities with both accreditation programs only and others. So thank you. I think, oh, people are still logging on. Great. All right, this is helpful for us. I think we can move on to the second question. What is your level of familiarity with the NCARB competency framework? So we know people are coming to this meeting with different levels of kind of experience and exposure to the framework itself. Okay, fantastic. So those who are not at all familiar, if you click on that link, there's a really concise write-up about what those competencies are and what they're intended to be. We have that webinar that's still on our posted on our website, but it sounds like most people here have been following this conversation and are familiar with what it's all about. So next question is open-ended. What is your, oh, not an open-ended question. Hold on. All right.
Not
So
yet.
Not yet. Okay, if you have reviewed the competency framework, how many of the competencies do you think you can cover in your accredited degree programs?
The next question is for non-accredited degree programs.
Yep, so if you don't have an accredited degree program, that's just not applicable. I'm guessing some of you are sort of going through the PDF and trying to assess how many of the 16 you can cover. Okay, some, most. I think this roughly represents people on this call. You want to go to the next one? How many of the competencies do you think you can cover in your non-accredited degree programs? And so these would be the 2-year associate degrees, the non-accredited 4-year degrees. Okay, I feel like we lost a few people, but this helps to understand this. Thank you. And then our next questions opens it a bit broader, right? So if you had a chance to take a look at the 16 competencies, we're sort of taking a step back and asking what are the foundational values, behaviors, and attitudes that you want graduates to have from an architectural education? So critical thinking is coming up, empathy, media literacy, open-mindedness, design thinking. I don't know, how do you scroll down, Mike? Oh, that's okay, we're good. Does your scroller mouse allow you to scroll down without clicking on something? Oh, there we go. Okay, collaboration, problem solving, service, ethical foundation, media literacy, design thinking, design as a method, opportunity, design thinking skills. Okay, this is helpful. Social justice. It really leads into the next questions that we're going to take on in the breakout rooms. Ecological impact, collaboration, civic responsibility, systems thinking. Okay, what's nice is a lot of these things are reoccurring, and I think that's what we're trying to lift up. Okay, that's 28 responses out of 48. Anybody else need a little bit more time? Again, we're collecting this data. This comes out. We actually do things with the information. So we do hope you'll contribute and put in a note or so. Okay, then. Our next set of questions is what we're really going to get to in the breakout discussion. So as I mentioned, right, this NCARB 16 competencies are out. It's announced. That is established. What hasn't yet been established is how they will be validated. So this is an opportunity to be proactive about how education might factor into their process and at least be part of their discussions as they move forward. So the first breakout discussion question is how can NCARB's 16 competencies be acquired, demonstrated, and validated in our educational programs and institutions, and would encourage people to think of diverse options and opportunities that are future facing. And then we'd also like to have the groups discuss other foundational or additional competencies. So this is outside of the 16 NCARB competencies, right? So when NCARB presents about the competencies, they refer to it as this blue cylinder, which is a kind of minimum standards. And then there's this larger box, and those are, in addition, we want you to talk about the things that are in that larger box. Those things that we think graduates need to improve the quality of the built environment. That could be in the profession or outside of the profession. As part of this conversation, how might these highlight the value of higher education? How might these represent additional expertise or areas of specialization as we work to distinguish the difference and value of what we offer in our programs versus what might be obtained as a competency purely for the profession. So those are the questions. We're gonna be put into separate breakout groups. Any questions before we do that? Okay, we're all back together. I do want to give Jeff Day an opportunity. Jeff, at least in our breakout group, there's a lot of overlap between conversations about competencies and accreditation. So we wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself as the new president and say a few words.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kathy. Sorry I wasn't here at the beginning. I got stuck in a weather-related traffic jam for a long time on the highway. But so I'm Jeff Day. I'm a professor of architecture and landscape architecture at the University of Nebraska, and I'm the current president of NAB. I previously served on the ACSA board prior to being nominated by ACSA and then appointed by the NAB board. So I'm pleased you're having this conversation, and thank you for inviting me. I mean, I guess I could invite myself as a faculty member, but thank you for allowing me to speak as NAB president. I think this is a critical conversation that we are also having on the NAB board. We have a board meeting tomorrow and Friday, and we'll be talking about aspects of this. And I'm sure it'll be ongoing as we look at the I don't know what we make of these competencies and how we relate to them in education. And so we welcome your feedback and really listening hard at what we're hearing today. Thank you.
No, thanks so much, Jeff. And for those who joined us a little late, we also have Jeremy Fretz from NCARB if you want to chat any other questions about the framework. For those of you who joined in hoping this was an introductory presentation, which this is not, we're starting to dig a little deeper. And then with that, hopefully the moderators in each group took a few minutes to get their remarks ready, because we're just going to go around. Everybody has about 4 or 5 minutes to report out. We'll just start with group 1.
Is that me? Group 1.
Group 1 is Mo.
Okay. So I'll start with the second question first, because that's what we ended with. And we talked a little bit about the value of our degrees in the context of the devaluing of higher education in general. And I think came away with this idea that, Jeff shared this, and I should just let him say this, but, that ultimately the universities are kind of these research and development wings of practice, and that it's important that we sort of maintain that relationship, and that we're not just training students skills-based, but we actually have this ability to kind of find answers to important issues that the practice and public don't have the time or, let's say, the resources to do those things. So I would say that that's part of the foundational part. And then we had, I think for the first question, the how, we did get into some specifics, but then we talked much more broadly about the issues. Maybe one read on this continues to be the sidestepping of education in the pathway to licensure that concerns, I think, all of us, and whether or not that's a reality of what's happening, or really an outcome of what these competencies are about. But that's something that we really have to kind of contend with. We talked about whether NCARB, there might be a version of an NCARB accreditation versus a NAB accreditation, and what that might mean or look like, and whether that's, pitting two institutions, I don't say against each other, but just sort of like thinking about what that might mean. And then maybe more specifically, we talked briefly about what our schools could do in terms of some or most of the competencies. We actually talked about the ones that would be the hardest, which would be 9 and 10, about construction preparing and administration documentation for a construction phase of a project. But those would be very challenging to do within an institution. on a sort of regular basis, let's say. Does anybody else in the group want to add? All right, Marcella, give me the thumbs up.
Okay, thanks so much, Mo. We'll move along to Shelby in group 2.
Hi. So we had many different tangents that we went on, but I think a few of them under the first were how does NAB assessment in some way map over these competencies, or are the same assessment strategies that are used in NAB possible in these competencies, in the sense that there might be some overlap that helps save time or energy, or is it really important that those two stakeholders have different definitions of success? And that there are a lot of things that are really hard to measure. And so competencies and things like establishing public trust are difficult to pin down. We had some ideas about additional competencies, some of them around like really rapidly changing information sources, and such as artificial intelligence, and how architects will play a role in evaluating information produced through an AI or through AI sources. How do you kind of create credibility? And then some missing competencies we discussed were aesthetic judgment, all of the humanities, critical thinking, human experience, creativity, communication, and technology use. And then we had some discussions around areas, possibilities of specialization in architectural education that happen sort of organically already in offices, around people becoming really focused on something such as technology or a subset of technology, or construction administration, or contracts or policy. Okay, did I miss anything for our group?
Okay, that works for group 2. Thank you. Group 3 is June.
Yes, hi. So we had some sort of wide-ranging conversation. I would say to the first question, the responses ranged from what should be fairly straightforward, that we can use assessment rubrics and go through our curriculum and figure out ways to tie what we do and teaching to these competencies, and to really how does this really change anything? We do what we do as educators, that students sort of know to be good architects. It's way more than being minimally competent, and sort of they'll figure it out. Those graduates who want to pursue the licensure will do what they need to do in order to meet the requirements to get the credential. And so there was a kind of range of responses as I felt there. So one, what doesn't really change things so much, to this is an opportunity for us to kind of align. And then we had a kind of, with the second one, I think some wide-ranging responses from how important it is to learn from to actually understand the people who most know how buildings go together and have all of that practical experience, the value of that might come from having those experiences, and aren't things that you could necessarily learn in school or in education, versus this notion that education is really preparing for the whole career, and being more resilient to the kinds of things that may change over time, and not what you may be doing when you're first employed. But if you don't have that foundation, then you might kind of run out of steam further along in your career path, and that kind of, instead of being in a reactive mode as educators, that we maybe need to be I don't know, telling or putting forward another another story, another narrative about that. Let's see. And then, this notion of education, its value as being an accelerator to the whole process. And did I miss anything? I'm trying to emphasize things that maybe were a little distinct from what's already been said. Anybody in my group want to weigh in?
No,
Okay.
I got it.
everybody wants to eat dinner. Oh, I heard somebody.
That was just me making fun.
All right.
Okay. Okay, thanks so much, June. We have group 4, Kendall.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you. So our group talked about there's being some general consensus that the items, the competency items in design and documentation domain 1 through 8 looked and felt attainable, as well as potentially number 15 and 16 in practice and project management. But underlying was the question of really whether schools were interested in acquiring, demonstrating, and validating these competencies. Not because they weren't already talking about and teaching many of the competencies, but if there was an underlying misalignment of the mission of state regulators and the mission of educational institutions, right? And so a little bit of this trying to fit, a square peg in a round hole. In addition to that, we talked about how the implementation would vary at different institution types based on length of program, and also that there was some potential for greater flexibility and access, and I think everybody on the call appreciated that. Maybe 1 or 2 questions about iPal and the success of iPal or the lack thereof, and how this either replaces or works alongside of. So we had a number of, kind of curiosity questions. And also kind of the note that it seems like we're in a time where everybody, this is just a general note, where organizations are just kind of marching forward, maybe with less collegiality between the alliances, just in general. And then for the second question, the items that were highlighted were social equity, critical thinking, history and theory, innovation or forward thinking. Like the comment was that the competencies map for right now, but maybe don't allow for forward thinking and projection and movement of the profession and or the discipline. Research, the climate crisis and environmental responsibility, and or diverse ways of making.
Thanks, Kendall. Any other comments from Kendall's group before we move on? All right, thanks, Kendall. And last group, Jose, group 5.
Group Jose had the benefit of 2 experts, Jeremy and John, with us, which actually proved pretty valuable because we had a range of people who were familiar or less so with the competencies. And so we got to pose some questions in our session that touch on many of the things that have already been raised, but we also had some background context that we benefited from, and we tried to capture a little bit in our notes. And thank you, Jeremy and John, for being patient with some of our questions. But for that first round, I mean, we've touched on it with others. The question of what kind of assessment or metric would be used I think John shared with us that in some of their NCARB's thinking behind the scenes earlier on, this could be a portfolio model. It could be like a team room, that there would be evidence in some form or fashion. The questions did come up around redundancy. Would NAB and NCARB be required to certify things? Could NCARB certify a curriculum in a way that allowed a school to have confidence that their graduates, assuming they achieved a certain minimum level in a course or in the curriculum and graduated, that they, with that degree, would be deemed competent because of the success they would have had as a student in a curriculum that had been approved previously. We did make the point a little bit that folks have gone on to become architects with either the traditional 3 E's that many of us have, or just experience in the new model. There might be a variation where someone could pursue experience, pursue examination, or pursue education potentially somewhere down the road. Either all of those could be independent paths almost. Correct me if I'm wrong, others, if I'm mischaracterizing that. But a big question did come up around who would review these, who would regulate these. Would universities be in the business of certifying qualifications? Would state boards, would elected officials be part of that? This question that was raised in Kendall's group sounds a little bit like in ours, that it was described as at the moment or in the past as having a 3-legged stool, and it had redundancies that were built in, but that was one way of maintaining stability, quality control, and ensuring that a well-rounded candidate was also technically competent, among other things, capturing many sides, but similarly functioning almost like 3 branches of government, checks and balances against one or another. What does this do? Does it take us a leg away from the stool? Was part of our broader conversation. Though folks did point out this might leave schools with an opportunity to differentiate themselves, that anything over and above the 16 competencies might be a place of the schools could create distinction for themselves, uniqueness in their curriculum. Some schools might choose to cover all or none of those competencies, but the way that they approach it might begin to speak to the ethos and the vision of those programs as they imagined what it means to be an architect. Coming to the second question, we were wondering, maybe echoing the conversation about innovation, where's the creativity, where's the architecture in those competencies? One of the benefits of a school is that they all can approach things slightly differently, that they offer the opportunities to develop creativity and competency simultaneously over the course of a curriculum. John pointed out one of the benefits of a school is that they have been the places where we've broadened the canon, right? That we've introduced diverse worldviews in a way that one might not get should they only go through an experience route, for example. So clearly a place where the educational systems that we have a real strength. It was interesting for at least one person that we talked about competency number 8, coordination about integrated systems. The distinction between coordinating a complex set of systems and actually having some technical expertise in any one of those systems got raised. Again, maybe an area where schools might be able to add to the broader blue box that the cylinder didn't capture in previous diagrams. An area beyond the basic competencies, area of expertise that goes beyond minimum or initial competency. I think we did talk a little bit about nomenclature, the difference between why initial licensure, since many of us don't get licensed in the same place multiple times, but there was a distinction being made between what was previously called minimally qualified at the moment of licensure versus an initial licensure with a kind of expansive view forward, is the way I interpreted that. In order not to be too redundant with other points, I think those were the bigger ones that come to the surface. Again, I think we echoed some of the other concerns earlier that people raised in their rooms, but I'd invite my group to chime in, make sure that I didn't miss something that was important or I didn't mischaracterize something.
Anybody else from group 6? 5, sorry. 5? Okay, thanks so much, Jose. And I know in our group, we spent right at the end where you sort of get nuts, talked about really radically rethinking evaluation, getting rid of grades, thinking about qualitative approaches. So I know that's one end. And I know some of you have been talking about AI. I wanted to also invite Phil Bernstein to talk about how that might be integrated into evaluation methods moving forward.
Sorry, was that question for me? I'm sorry.
That question was for you, Phil.
Yeah, can you just repeat it? My sound kind of jumped out for a second there.
I was passing the baton to you to talk about how AI might be integrated into evaluation of competencies.
Oh, well, I don't have an opinion about this right now, but I'm starting a little project here to look at the 16 competencies with some folks that are have a lot of expertise in some of the evolving platforms that are out there. And I want to do a little analysis and figure out which portions of the work that are detailed in the competencies. And if you go to the next page, you see those bullet points after each one. If you look at each bullet point, what's the vulnerability of each one of those things to being subsumed by an algorithm? In other words, I find us at this very interesting moment where we're talking about alternative paths to a career at the same point where the profession may be threatened in some way by being replaced by automation. And I think we ought to take a stance on that because I think it creates a critique of it creates a set of arguments about what the definition of competencies are. And it also could reify where there are places where you actually need a human architect to do a job. So I think the jury's kind of out on this question, but it's a really interesting one. Did I answer your question, Kathy, sufficiently?
No,
Yeah,
I think I
sound
had the
was
wrong
working.
prompt, but that was perfect because that was a little bit about what we also had discussed in our group. How do you evaluate the competencies or the skills that cannot be subsumed by AI? With that, we have a little bit of time left. What are comments from the group sort of stepping back and looking at all of this?
I had a question that kind of came up in our group, and and maybe Jeremy could answer this. Where is NCARB standing right now about whether the ARE will remain in some recognizable form and reorganized around the competencies? Or is there a possibility that sitting down and taking a number of exams will no longer be the paradigm?
So it is a possibility that sitting down and taking a series of exams may no longer be necessary. As I shared in our group, the vision, and we're still, and I know it gets tiring to hear us give the same answer. John Dwyer here is on the committee that's trying to flesh out how to do these things. But the vision is that there will be at least two ways to meet most, if not all of the competencies. So one might meet the competency in it with some sort of validated educational outcome, or one might take an exam. And it will probably be a smaller exam than those that we have now. And we have no hesitation in saying that. There's probably going to be more chunked, smaller chunks. I will say there's a rumor that we heard got out there that we were immediately getting rid of the exams and changing that up. That is not the case. So if that rumor got to you, just ignore it. And I didn't even give you all the details of it because I don't want to circulate the rumor. But we have small changes, and this is all publicly available information. We have small changes expected in the exam in 2026, and the bigger changes will be forthcoming around 2028 once we figure out what those changes are. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and what you did open up there is that there might be a way with a validated educational experience to
Yes.
not have to take
Right.
parts or.
Correct.
So that's the carrot. That's
Yeah,
the
that's the part that
carrot.
I think is exciting is, we have a lot of folks who say, why can't we be like Europe and license you upon graduation? And, for the first time, we're opening the door and saying, maybe that's possible.
Thanks, June. Thanks, Jeremy. Any other questions? And I do want to I would like, before we close out, to maybe get remarks from someone representing 2-year programs, 4-year, the non-accredited programs, and then from everyone else. E-class, did you just unmute?
Yeah, I
as well?
just want to say, if this is the case, who will validate the school meeting the competencies? Is it still NAB? Is it NCARB? I mean, is it a group? Like, I mean, where is that?
So
That also, I don't understand how it's gonna be done. I don't know if you all know it, because we talked in our group with you. I was in that group that maybe like a portfolio that you look at it and how, I mean, so
Yeah.
who's gonna be like the organization? Is it NAB, or is NAB gonna disappear and gonna be NCARB?
So right now, we don't have the answer to that. It's not been, we've talked, I know there's been talk of, looking at it at a university level. Like, if it's a NAB accredited degree, it just automatically ticks several boxes. That might be a possibility. But again, I'm sharing with you things that have been discussed. Nothing has been decided yet, because we're really still researching this. It could also be something where you have evidence from a course and we give you some guidelines. Like, if your students have these things in the course, and can provide those to a portfolio, that might be the way that it's done. But we are really still developing the toolkit of how to do validated educational assessment and looking at other industries and other professions and how they do it. And so if any of you have brilliant ideas about that, or want to influence it, let me, send your thoughts my way.
That's exactly why we're having this. Trying to be proactive about all of this. So thanks for the great question, E-class. Thanks, Jeremy. Any other comments? If we could hear maybe somebody from the community colleges first.
Sure, I'll
Joe,
jump
you
in.
want to? Yeah.
Yeah. Just a big thank you to NCARB. It's been a great opportunity to be part of this conversation. And I know a lot of our constituents are quite optimistic that we can start to hit some of these competencies, and that we believe we have been hitting some of these competencies. So what a great way for us to prove our curriculum, to show that we can do and rise to the occasion. I think just being in this room with all of you is a great opportunity as well. I think we're really vetting out a new solution. I'm happy to play a small part in this. And I know we're looking forward to seeing where this goes. So I just can't wait to see what the next generations of architects will become. Will they become a different type of person? Will it become a specialist? So it's really, it's exciting to see who evolves into this.
Thanks, Joe. For your programs, I know there's a bunch of you, but I don't know, John Dwyer, do you want to?
Sure, I guess we got one of those. We have a 4-year program in there. I think maybe I'll just a thought that's been kind of nagging at me around for a while. I guess since maybe mid-January, we'll say. I wonder what our role is in higher education, and whether there is a competency in here somewhere that is separate from the NCARB competencies, that is our role to make well-rounded human beings, not an algorithm, sorry, but to make well-rounded human beings, to be whatever we want to define. I know that's argumentative, and I wonder right now what our role is to resist. There was a moment not recently where I know that NAB was considering rewriting some of the conditions to eliminate DEI language, and I just want to commend Tanya and Jeff and everyone for listening to all of us and not making that change, and allowing us to, all kind of collectively take whatever risk comes along with that. But I'll just say, I think I wonder whether we need somehow to articulate, in the context of these competencies that are just competencies, what our role as educators is to provide a global perspective, and to create well-rounded, good human beings. Well, should an architect be a good person, and how might we shape that in education?
Thanks, John. Great comment. And I know you've been involved with some of the development of this. So sorry, when you called you out. I don't know if you were ready for that. Anybody else? Also, on as we start to close this conversation, next steps, how you want to see this conversation moving forward. This is part of an effort to really be moving in line with NCARB as they're pursuing how this gets implemented and how we are included in how they see this moving forward. Any other suggestions from this group? What you want to see, what you want to attend? Nope.
I'll chime in briefly if it's all right. I think some of this just raises the importance for appreciating the different missions that the partner organizations have. You know, state licensure, the legislative background for those kinds of things is very important. The educational missions, as they vary across institutions, is also important. And from NCARB to AIA to ACSA to NAB, I think one way or another, we've got to figure out how to work together and get out of the impasse that has emerged, the details of which I don't know. And I'm happy to not know about it, really, how it has emerged. But meanwhile, the dysfunction is frustrating. And I think we're facing a situation where the practice of architecture, I think all of us here probably, I'll go out on a limb, have a rather high view of architecture. While the fact is, different sectors of American society will view it differently, and that's the situation we deal with. So I would just, I think in terms of next steps, we need to find a way to move forward for, I don't know, positively, in good faith, to manage and settle the fees issues and whatever else. This long history we have of the organizations working together, we need to figure out how to work together well. So I'll just say that.
No, thank you for your comments. And I think we share similar viewpoints. And I don't think we've given up on the idea of this three-legged stool or the four-legged stool. So that is still moving forward.
Good to hear.
To regroup as a collective. So with that, you know, I do want to thank you all for committing your time to this. I know it's very late in some of the places that you are. If you have more to add or you have more to ask, always feel free to reach out to Mike or myself. I want to thank all of the board members and the moderators who are here today. Thank you so much for your constant attention to everything that has been going on, and there's a lot going on. I also want to thank our incredible ACSA staff who is here and always here for us. We have Kendall Nicholson, Daniel Dent, Eric Ellis, Mike Monty. We all know how fortunate we are. Yes, one day we're all gonna do a kind of Zoom fireworks when we get that coordinated. As we mentioned before, we hope to see people in our next caucus. So we have a caucus meeting on February 27th. That's more focused on the future of faculty development. And we do have an annual business meeting on March 5th. And as Mike put into the chat, those of you who are joining us for our annual meeting, there will be a NAB-led workshop there and another rendition of our accreditation futures workshop. So we hope to see you at any one of those sessions or events. Take care, good night, and we hope to see you again. Thank you.